We find ourselves right now economically in a great time. Looking at 2021, we had, as I've mentioned before, over $8 billion of investment coming into the state of Indiana, and this year, or last year, 2022, more than $22 billion, and we look forward to that continuing. I think there's a point in time right now where people are recognizing both the Midwest and how competitive Indiana is, and we want to try and continue to capitalize on that. You'll see, I think you'll notice a lot of the governor's issues align with what the Senate's trying to do with regard to being fiscally responsible, driving health care, both costs and the health of Hoosiers across the state of Indiana, as well as the public safety with some of our initiatives. And of course, ours is another one, data privacy, which I don't think he mentioned, but just appreciate the governor's leadership. Looking forward to working with him on all of his initiatives. And I think come toward the end of April, when we finish up our legislative session and finalize a budget, we'll have a great story to tell. So I think the speaker has some words as well. Then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Senator Bray. I would agree. I appreciate the governor's comments today, talking about the momentum that Indiana has, not just across the Midwest, but across the country. So many things are trending in the right direction. And, you know, our goal at the end of this legislative session is to make sure that as he noted, that we continue to build on those efforts and you know, create an even better place for people to live and raise their families and to work. So we will work in cooperation with our Senate colleagues in the governor's office to make sure we have a successful session. So with that, we'll take your questions.
There was an enthusiastic ovation from the Democrats for his free textbook plan. A little less enthusiastic from the Republican side. Is that going to be a tough sell for your caucuses?
We'll have to talk about it. Obviously, K through 12 public education is super important. As we all know, it's the most, largest line item in the budget, and will continue to be. And so that's part and parcel of that conversation. Whether or not we can get to that with the textbooks is something we'll talk about in our caucus, and I'm sure the House will as well.
Similar question on the overall K through 12 base funding that he wants. Currently, the $1.157 billion. Where are your caucuses on that number?
Well, you know, I remind people all the time, we spend almost half the state budget goes into education. I would, K-12 education, I expect that to be the case again this year. I would expect our budget will be similar to the governor's, you know, and we'll work to, you know, make sure we provide proper increases and you know, give parents more flexibility in regards to where they send their children. So, you know, we expect a strong education budget.
When we talked to you all around Organization Day, there was some hesitation at the number for public health funding. That request has come down a little bit. What's the temperature of the caucuses for that kind of dramatically different, unprecedented infusion into the public health system?
You know, I think Dr. Bach, Senator Kenley have done a really, really good job of talking to our caucuses and talking to the folks to help them understand what the commission did. You know, we recognize additional investments needed. We're going to work with Dr. Bach, Senator Kenley, and I'm sure Chairman Barrett, Chairman Charbonneau, to make sure that we increase additional investments. But we also want to make sure that, you know, it's just not about making investments. It's about ensuring the outcome that comes with those investments. So, you know, we want to make sure we have metrics for success for all that. But you know, I think we all recognize there needs to be a bigger investment in public health. We just want to make sure that we do that. And the governor's been very clear on this too, about we make sure it's not just an investment, it's about getting the right outcomes.
I want to comment on that as well, just to first of all agree with what the speaker said. You know, with something like that, that's a new thing that the state is. It's some infrastructure we're trying to deliver those public health dollars in a different way, and it is going to be super important for the state of Indiana to do a couple of things. One, set goals for ourselves. Find a way to measure those goals to make sure that what we are doing and the money that the Hoosier dollars that we're investing in this project are actually having the impact that we want them to have, and then hold ourselves accountable if that's not the case. So we have to focus on that.
The governor's budget proposal also includes $300 million for an annual fund for a deal closing fund for the IEDC, another $300 million for your tax credit cap, and there's also a one-time $100 million injection for a fund to purchase land. Where do you stand on those proposals? Are you on the same page? Do you like what the governor proposed?
Well, I think the governor recognizes in those proposals, as what I kind of prefaced in my initial comments, that right now, Indiana is poised to continue to get more investment from outside, from both companies that are coming in from other countries. They're trying to come back home to the United States, as well as companies across the nation that are looking to the Midwest, and particularly Indiana, as a great place to do business. And so that's what brought in $22 billion of investment this last year in 2022. And we see that continuing for a couple of years. So it's an opportunity to capitalize on that. So that'll certainly be part of the budget and the conversation. But I think we need to recognize that there's a real opportunity to do some nice things that will affect in a positive way Indiana's economy for decades in the future.
Why the skepticism on the governor's textbook plans? Do you agree with what he called it a disguised tax? Do you think that's a proper assessment of those fees?
Tom, I'm not sure I'd say it's skepticism. I think, we want to make sure the mechanics work, and we want to make sure that, like I noted earlier, we're going to have over half, right around half the state budget in K-12 education. We want to make sure that those dollars are used the most effective way. I'm not sure there's skepticism. We're just working through the mechanics of it all and thinking about, the best way to do it.
I want to follow up on Peter's question about all that IEDC money. There's not as much transparency when it comes to the IEDC because they're a quasi-public agency instead of just a regular agency. When you're talking about giving them that much money to do with pretty much however they want, do they need a little more oversight than they currently have?
First of all, I'm going to even add to that number, $500 million for Reading, which is part of it too, which I think is extraordinarily important, and as the governor noted tonight, has been a tremendously successful program. I want to just note that IEDC has been tremendously cooperative with working with Chairman Thompson, with Chairman Mishler, with all of us as they've pursued opportunities, and so I feel very comfortable about that. I think we are grateful and appreciative for the kind of historic time that we're in right now, and we recognize we need to make additional investments to continue that momentum. But we've had I feel like a really transparent relationship with them on what's taking place, the opportunities that present themselves, and hopefully what we think will be a very strong 12 to 24 months.
To follow up on that, I mean, I know when there were talks with you guys that it sounds like they've been pretty transparent, but when it comes to like the average citizen being able to keep up with it, like Brandon said, are there going to be any changes in, their kind of transparency to the general public?
Well, obviously IEDC puts out a report, and one of the things that's important in any of these things are very sensitive negotiations, and so up until the deal gets closed, I mean, it's important that those deals are kept close to the vest, because most of the time you've got multiple entities competing. So they put out an annual report. I mean, we've worked with, in my legislative career, I've worked with IEDC through the years, and they always come in for their budget presentations. We have lots of opportunities to ask questions, but it is a little different, just because they're negotiating on very competitive and important deals.
One thing I'll say in addition to that as well, and the conversations that we've had, both the speaker and I and Senator Mishler, is that with any of these investments, we've asked them to focus very closely on the return on their investment. So you'll see the jobs that come in aren't going to be below or even on par necessarily with the county average in which they're landing. These are going to be real opportunities that have a really large return on their investment. That's what we've asked them to focus on, and we'll still have opportunities through the legislative session as well as through the budget committee review to kind of keep an eye on what's going on there.
I want to stay on that topic just a little longer. Specifically, that $150 million the governor wants to put toward essentially a permanent land acquisition fund. This will be sort of like what we're seeing in Boone County. Some of the landowners there are pretty upset over what's going on with that. Are you comfortable with giving IEDC that kind of leeway for land acquisition?
I think some of the landowners are all maybe upset. Most people are thrilled. And so, what Secretary Chambers, Governor Holcomb, and others have told us is it's important to have site ready land available and, in these deals. And I think this is just, again, this is the nature of competing in a very competitive environment against other states. And I think, what the Boone County example, is an excellent example when you can have the land, you can have the infrastructure all in place. It just is a huge competitive advantage.
Speaker, you mentioned, you threw ready on top of Peter's question earlier. Of all the things you heard from the governor tonight, of all the things in his agenda that he rolled out last week, is a bunch more money for Ready the easiest to sell for you all?
I don't know if I think our caucus is very supportive of Ready, Brandon, but I think there's a lot of things in the governor's budget that our caucus is excited about. There are things that we'll obviously talk through, and but I think, this is, he had a very robust budget. Excited about talking about it all, but clearly Ready impacts all of our communities. You see the momentum that's taking place in places that, as the governor noted today, it's all across the state, and sometimes it's in places that haven't had a tremendous amount of momentum prior to this. So we're excited about Ready and what it's doing for our communities across the state.
I'll ask one more.
Okay.
Between your two caucuses then, and not the governor, you talked the other day about, and Senator Mishley talked about wanting to obviously do the $1 billion to pay down 396 that'll take place this fiscal year, but potentially do even more, try and shorten that timeline further. The House is historically, they support that, but has not been quite as eager to spend the dollars, more dollars to shorten that timeline any further than it's already shortened. Will that be a source of friction between your two budgets?
Well, anytime you put together a budget of $40 billion, of course, there's differences in ways to spend that. And I don't know, there's some, we obviously have some differences of opinion between one house or the next, but I can tell you, we speak on a constant basis, almost daily, frankly, and that communication is really beneficial. And so while there are some differences on priorities, they're very slight, and we'll certainly be successful in crafting the budget this year, I have no doubt.